feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. Jurell.
Here we are.
Right? Here we are. This is a new thing. We're gonna call them Just Faith. Just Faith episodes. We're gonna start it off like this every time. So this is something that popped into my head.
What you got?
Joe, I just wanted to ask. I didn't know if you woke up this morning feeling this way. You feel perfect?
No.
You still got some areas to improve on and grow in?
We got a lot to work with. A lot.
Well, same for me. So let's talk about it. Okay. So I wanted to start up those podcasts like that every single time, where it just opens up the door and just reminding not only us that we have so much room to continue to grow, and also too that we didn't wake up perfect today either, and also too when we're talking and discussing some of these topics that are not going to only step on some other people's toes, but also largely our toes and mistakes and setbacks and things that we've had throughout our lives, and what it practically looks like to have faith, right? Just faith, and continue to walk forward in our lives, and what it looks like to really have that in our lives. And again, not every single episode, I'm sure we're going to be here and there and X, Y, and Z, but I want to do these episodes purely where instead of where God comes up in the conversation, where God is the conversation, and like talking through like what that actually looks like. And then also, we've had you on the podcast, and we end up usually going straight to God usually anyways. We have our business conversations as well, but I think that this is an area too that as a resource for me, and also wisdom from the other side, as I wanted to connect you and also connect a lot of people with our major resource I have in my life, which is also, you and I, and having these conversations as well. And there's so many times that we're sitting in the office and we're like, man, like that would be such a good like podcast, or some of the conversations we have. So I was like, man, like if we started doing that, and I also too, it's been crazy with our, I guess you call them fans, followers, all those other things, right? That when they reach out and they're always talking about, like when we're sharing a lot of these things, even business wise, I think it's pretty clear. Obviously, that being the foundation of like kind of how we make majority of our decisions and why we do all the things that we do, and it doesn't make sense if the faith component's not there. So I wanted to do a podcast with that and like talking through like practically what it looks like in your life. To walk with faith and implement, faith and lean into your faith as you're going through your life. So, yeah.
Before you even go on, I don't know if you noticed it, but also the beginning question reminds us of the standard. Jesus, when you asked the question, are you perfect today? He was. And so as we go through this too, it's just a reminder of like, beginning of it, hey, chasing perfection, never going to get there, but trying to, hopefully, one day. Yeah. In heaven.
No, 100%. And also, I think it's funny too, I actually wrote this down when I was thinking about this last night, is randomly throughout the show, and also too, permission for you obviously to do the same, is I think those reminders consistently, where I had that in there, is I'm randomly just going to ask you like, hey, are you perfect? It's like, and just like, all right, just checking, because that's the same thing too, is like, we kind of, because like literally what you said is when we can get into that space where we forget, when I was saying this quote to you the other day too, is like when we don't leave room for humanity, right? We're gonna have a whole bunch of we have all these unspoken expectations that we not only put on like our partners, our friends, also just any relationship that we have, our acquaintances, at work, all these things of these unspoken expectations. And so I think the big thing there as well is remembering that when we're expecting the other person across from us, or the person in that relationship in that, whatever capacity, if we're expecting them to be perfect, really what we're expecting them to be is Jesus. And in reality, when we start slipping into that space, like you mentioned, it's a good thing for us to remember that that's just a human, right? That's sitting across from us, or that we're interacting with. And us expecting them to be Jesus, like we're going to be let down every single time. And so it's really, just really important for us is to always keep that in mind, right? It's like, again, like we shouldn't be, because we're going to be held by the same standard, right? Like the same way that we judge, the same way that we treat others, the same expectations that we have of others, that's the same expectation. It's a mirror, back on us as well. And that's going to be the measuring stick that which the Bible says that we will be measured as well. So I think it's that important reminder, right? That is the same thing as well. It's like, am I asking this other person to be Jesus? There's a difference between being like Jesus and working towards Jesus and living a life that, tries to honor him. And as we get closer to him, we become more one and like him than it is to be Jesus, right? And yeah.
It's so funny because like on that note, right? When you talk about when you lose the humanity piece, so everyone here knows, but if you don't know, 2 months ago I had a baby girl, and something that I've become hyper aware of as I'm out in public are people, right, and just how they interact and how they drive.
Yep.
Now I'm the grandpa driving all
for
slow, and like, why is this person speeding and what's their rush? And I think too, it's also just what I've noticed was. Sadly, but this is the world around us, and hopefully as we have more people aiming to be more Christ-like, we can help change. But just the lack of humanity and the understanding that we all need each other, and how to help each other, and how we're all going through, yes, our lives individually, but what a beautiful piece when we can take time out to help someone else or to think of someone else on their own journey. Because as I was driving to get to the point, I was just like, we're all here in our own separate journeys in our own world, worried about ourselves. And
getting to work, trying to get here to there, getting all our stuff done.
And so it's just like through that, I feel that sometimes we become a little bit robotic and lose the humanity and human piece of things, and don't really look at each other as each individuals that have people that love them and families and all the above. And so I think it's an interesting piece as we continue to talk about things to hopefully if you're listening to this that you choose to do something today that helps someone else or shed some light in someone's life or some love, because there's a lot of opposite happening obviously in this world.
For sure. And then also I wanted to start with the base and also some plugs for some inspiration that kind of led to some of these things. So first off, we watch a ton of Michael Todd as well, like, with it. But obviously one of his mentors that he also, first inspired him, and then he also got inspired by Michael Todd, right? And were encouraged by Michael Todd to actually start this podcast and kind of, he was talking about it in the podcast that I was watching as well, or the one you ended up sending over to me, he was like, man, I didn't want to be the old guy that was starting a podcast, X, Y, and Z, with it. What's his name again?
Tim Ross.
Yeah, Tim Ross. That's right. So Tim Ross, was Mike. And then if you don't know who Michael Todd is, he's also, I guess you would say, like a leading pastor, right now that has a lot of influence in the space. And he's also came through a lot of trials and tribulations and all these things, even of recent. And he was actually sharing in this podcast. And so, anyways, the podcast is called The Basement, where they actually literally sit in Ross's basement and they have discussions about God, and they just, just like conversations, and they basically recording, raw conversations, right? So that being part of the inspiration, and like actually having conversations of what it practically looks like, not in a church, not just, sitting there and going like, okay, X, Y, okay, but like real situations that are happening in our lives. And then also to how we're actually, and then sharing testimony about like how we're applying the word and how we're applying that faith, how we're applying those situations in real time when things happen, throughout our lives, and like what that actually looks like. I think is a very useful resource, and I think something that we can't have enough of. I don't think that we can have enough God in the world. So I think that the same thing with that, like inspiring from that. And then also, we were talking about this beforehand. My pup passed away a couple days ago, and so we were talking about that. Where I was thinking about it because we were at Bible study last night, Jerome made his way back to Bible study yesterday after being in quarantine with the baby there, just like lockdown mode when you first have your kid for that first like month or so, and so finally got to go back out and about, and she did great, by the way. She to my knowledge, I didn't hear a thing. You know what I'm saying? She was over there chilling. So I think that was also too when I was in Bible study last night. I was sharing about all the ways I was seeing God move through something obviously pretty traumatic, and also, it's so interesting because I had a conversation. Skylar actually, you reminded me when you were talking about the driving thing. Skylar was talking about that one time when he was talking about, when he had his kid, he was like talking about how people drive. He's like, oh, I could tell you don't got kids, just how like somebody drives, right? So that was funny, right? That's funny, and also too, it's interesting on the other side of that is one of the things that on that specific topic. That's one of the areas that actually helps me is sometimes when I'm starting to get like aggressive in traffic, right? Where I'm just like, I'm irritated, I'm frustrated, I'm in a hurry, I'm trying to get somewhere, right? All those things. And obviously I think one of the ways the enemy tries to get to all of us is traffic, right? That's that traffic. Hey, that sometimes that trip from here home can be some of the, the most frustrating moments of the day. So again, along with it is us having that conversation where one of the things I started thinking about, one of the things I think about a lot of times is literally that Skylar and his son, baby Jay, which is funny because y'all got baby Jays now, right? But him and baby Jay, like in the car next to me, and like how would I be driving, right? If they're in the car next to me. And the reason that it sounds silly, right? Because even the Bible, it tells us too that we shouldn't be on the like, if we only treat our friends well, right, then how are we any different than the world, right? If we only treat our family well, if we don't but it should be strangers, and we should care about others like that as well, right? And that's what we're challenged to do. And I think even with that, right, is that would change your perspective as you look at the person next to you in the car. It's like, well, if that was somebody that you loved and cared about, and like someone close to you like that, right, with someone that had their kid X, Y, and Z, like how would you feel and how are you driving in those situations? Well, it's like that's how we should be all the time. And it's awareness in my heart of how I'm not in those spots, and I don't have that perspective at times when I'm doing that. And like, that's really been a helpful thing. Or even too, like, again, obviously a stranger, like for example, let's say me and you were driving and I cut you off on accident, right? You're gonna be like, Joey, what are you doing? Like, blah, 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 laughing, whatever. Some random cut you off. Oh my, no, you don't have grace, right? Like I don't have grace there, right? And so I think that's like a big thing for me is like been challenging that is like, okay, if I did view strangers, like I view people that I love and I care about, again, like how much different my walk would be. But instead, which is actually crazy too, is, you look at that over time, like as the world has grown, right? Billions of people now, we've lost connection. We have more people than ever, right? Or I don't know the exact statistic, but again, from thousands of years ago, obviously, to now, right? Billions of people. But as we've gained more and more people in the world, we also have lost connection with others at the same time.
Not connected.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think like with that, it can be big. But, again, just going back to that main thing is like when we were at Bible study last night, it inspired me and going home and reflecting on that too. And just saying like, man, like these are the conversations or the thoughts I'm having now, or the wisdom that God has given me, and like how to respond in those moments where there is pain or that there is setback or there is something isn't going my way, or I do have, like really in my life, rather than having, and also I think in a lot of times in like sermons, for example, you can get in this places where, you're preaching, right? It's not a conversation. He's preaching. It's a different platform, right? So I think that, the basement, right, where you could have these real conversations of like, hey, this is like testimony. These are things that are actually happening in my life, and then also in real time, where we're sharing these experiences that, we've had. And also like, this is how I've applied God's word in these real moments in my life. And this is the wisdom that I pulled from it. And this is how he brought me through. And I think that is, again, not to take anything away from a sermon, it's a different branch, right? Like just like a Bible study or all of these things, right? It's a different conversation, and we're just trying to get the conversation, keep it going like that,
more of an intimate connection versus, I feel like also the time when you go to church, I'm there to learn, something
for sure.
Versus now I can, even when I was watching The Basement, it was, specifically I thought about you. When Michael Todd was talking about, all of the internet bullies he was facing and all the stuff he was going on online. That
what grown men also
crazy.
have to deal with things that kids are also dealing with
crazy.
What that looks like.
It's sad. But I think for all the beauty that is found on social media, there's also so much ugly.
Yeah.
Just hearing him speak on it, and what they said and how they moved and how they lean on God, whether it was, Tim talking about him walking in faith of starting this podcast. I think I think Michael's close to our age. He's like 34, 35.
Yeah.
But Tim's probably like 10 years his senior, 45-ish, closer to that age.
Yeah.
And so, him, retired pastor, starting a podcast at the age of 44, 45 years old, and then also doing it unfiltered and raw to where he can connect with, not just people his age, but younger generation too. And so being inspired and listening to them tell their stories about how, his obedience has now brought fruit, that he's touching so many people in so many ways. And same thing with, I think if you haven't listened to that episode, Michael Todd's specific obedience, because I think you've probably felt this way too when this happens, is like, he wanted to snap back. There's probably a lot of things he wanted to do in those moments, but being obedient to what God told him, always pays off in the end.
And I think the big thing, I think the big thing is the wisdom of the way that I want to handle it doesn't bring life. It brings me in that moment like I was thinking about this last night. Is, as you know, it's bad. I find it's fun for me to debate. I like to debate. I like these little witty comebacks. You know what I'm saying? I like to go back and forth and all these other things too. But the problem is and again, in certain times where, again, along with it, like God is put in my heart, I'm an innovator. I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna do these other things, right? So you need a little bit of that to go and challenge, and debate necessarily isn't a bad thing. Jesus was debating.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Jesus was debating. He wasn't going and making everybody feel good. He even said that. He's like, you go back to that verse, right? I'm gonna be like Tim and start pulling out verses, and we start looking up. Right? Is the same thing is when he's coming, he's like, when Jesus said is I came to turn, father from
against wives, fathers against daughters, daughters against mothers.
Yes, 100%, right? And what he was saying by that is not bringing division just to bring division, but understanding that again, for example, the son might follow, for example, I'll just bring Skylar up with this. We were having this conversation yesterday. Is Skylar, who's our pastor at our location that we're out here at in Central Church out in Aliante area, is. He was talking about this as well. Is within his own family, his mother doesn't believe when his brothers doesn't believe it, but his other brother's pretty deep in his faith. But, even within his own family, there's some large divisions, because when he's walking with faith and living that out, well, when the foundation is his mom and his brother not walking that faith, they don't understand his decisions, right? They don't understand his value system. They don't understand why would he do this, and they almost feel devalued because of not understanding the hierarchy of what God puts in place for us to what to put first and in what order, right? Mm-hmm. And so when it sounds even from a practical standpoint where you'd go family first, family first, family first. Well, the Bible doesn't preach that. Right. And also, too, there's wisdom in that. And while that feels like a cut or a slice or a pullback, and saying, what would you ever value more than family? And some people are really there with it. Right. Is the Bible talks about is God first. Right. And God, your wife, your kids. Right. And again, that's also very different outside of marriage than it is inside of marriage. Right. But if you don't have wife and kids, family is that, sector. But when you do have wife and kids, that also changes that hierarchy, right? Because again, your mother, your father, your brothers, your sisters, like they shouldn't be coming before your wife. And that changes things dramatically. Now, if you're outside of marriage and you're dating, courting, whatever you want to call it from that side, that is not the setup.
Not your
No,
wife.
no, no.
Not your
You haven't became one,
Yeah.
right? Which is what marriage is like that's where when God says that alignment happens, like that's how it should lay out. Because there's idolatry in all different ways, right? We could be idolizing our family, we could be idolizing money, we could idolize things. And most people, when they think idolatry, they think of the things that everybody's willing to jump behind, right? Like, oh yeah, like we shouldn't idolize things, we shouldn't idolize money, right? And all these things, but there's the ones that are a little bit more uncomfortable.
About your firstborn.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that feel a little bit more uncomfortable are my family, my son, my daughter, or, for example, it's so easy to slip into this place. For example, let's say somebody right now is probably listening to this, right? They went to go have a kid. Their wife died while she was in labor. And now you have this beautiful little girl, and without knowing, unconsciously, you made her an idol in your life, and you're doing everything you can to give this girl this life and to do all these other things, and without knowing, you started putting her above God, right? And we let as Michael Todd says, like you let the blessing, bamboozled by the blessing, right? And all of a sudden, you don't know how you got here, right? But you started doing everything, and what would that look like? That practically looks like, it's like, okay, what do you mean you put it in front of God? Like, what does that actually look like? It's like, okay, well, one, where are you spending your time? Where are you spending your money, right? And so all of a sudden, I stopped going, and obviously seasonal, right? You can explain this even more for people. It's like, again, I stopped going to church, or I stopped reading my Bible, or I stopped going to Bible studies, or I stopped doing all these things where instead I started, again, and it's one thing where you just went through this season. It's one thing, okay, I'm staying home, but I'm still reading my Bible, right? I'm still praying, right? I'm still in community in my own ways. I'm still doing all these things where I'm putting God first. It might look a little bit different, but God is still ranked first in my life, because I got to remember that, again, like God is the blesser, right? And the blessing, he's abundant. He could give us a billion blessings, right? That can come from that. He gave me this little girl, like he could give me 100 little girls. God, don't do that, please. Okay, right? Don't be doing that now. Don't be doing that now.
Good on that.
But again, along with that, right? Like he's the blesser, right? And a lot of times we get bamboozled by the blessing, and we start worshiping the blessing instead of the blesser, right? And God's wisdom there is He doesn't want, like, we start thinking of it as like a human, and we start going like, wow, you want to come first before everywhere? How arrogant, how this, how that, right? Which is silly, right? But when you're early in your faith, that's what it feels like, right? Like, oh, you want to come first, like that other thing. It's like, no. God's trying to put you on some game.
Yeah.
And He's like, listen, the moment that you take me out of that first spot, and I read this the other day, is that if God's not first in your life, then everything's out of order, right? Because if wherever He is, you got to re-rank everything to throw Him back at the top, right? And when you don't do that, He's not saying God doesn't need your worship. God doesn't need you to put Him first. No. He's telling you that if you put Him first, your life will get into order, right? He's trying to get, He don't need anything from you. He's trying to bless you, right? He's trying to put you on game. He's trying to give you wisdom. He's trying to help you understand that, like, I am the source. Put the source first, and all these other things will fall into place. The moment you start putting all the, again, you put the world in front of God, all these things are going to, again, and again, how does that look like in your life? Man, I should read my Bible, but I really want to watch Netflix. Oh, man, I should read my Bible. I should be praying. I should be spending time with God, and all these other things. It's like, okay, but I've been busy. I got to go to work tomorrow. I got to be up early. I got to blah, 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 blah. All these other things, right? And I start putting my work in front of God. I start putting my family in front of God, and it's like, man, I can't remember the last time I've been to church. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with God. I can't remember the last time X, Y, and Z. And we're all at different points on our walk there. But with you also recently having a kid, I think it'd kind of be good for you to kind of share that experience as well, because that's tough in that transition season, right? With all those things that are kind of going on.
Even before, and obviously you're very close, and for that part throughout the pregnancy, having a child in an untraditional way, and me and her mother. Really kind of leaning in towards God, because what did you say earlier about your responses on social media? They're not the most godly responses. Or for me personally, it was like, what I wanted to do or how I wanted to act. Things I wanted to say weren't very godly responses, and so.
Well, and also I want to note there as well, because I know what you're saying by that, but I could see how it can be misinterpreted. A godly response isn't like, that's why I wanted to hit on, right? Like a godly
love.
Yes, right. And also too, the other thing is something that brings life, right? And so for example, like a lot of people perceive godly as like, oh, I'm trying to be this like square, walk the straight line, rather than it being like from the same, like, yo, like I want to make decisions that bring not only me life, but the situation life and all these other things. Like I'm not walking in obedience because I'm trying to be, perceived a certain way, or this is the right thing to do, and I'm just trying to follow orders or rules. I'm doing this because this actually is fruitful and it brings me life. And so I'm not looking at God like God doesn't want something from me; He wants something for me, right? And when you're saying godly, there, I knew what you were saying, but I know a lot of people perceive godly as like, I'm trying to walk this straight line and don't fall off.
No.
You get what I'm saying?
And I'm not out here quoting off Bible scriptures left and right, but like you said, it's just conversations and decisions, like you just said, that out of love and life. And so, when we talk about actually leaning into our faith, I think that was the biggest thing kind of throughout the pregnancy, of making sure that, because at all facets of things, parents just want the best life for their child. That's it. And so after we were aligned there, it was like, okay, like how do we make this possible? Well, me and you, we're not gonna be able to do that by ourselves. Like we need some help. And obviously the having God, having the community, being in the Word, worshiping, going to the Bible studies, going to revival night at church, whatever, trying to be in church basically as much as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also I want to add this context as well, because I know that this was hard, for you as well, and for people not to get this wrong idea, and also to be encouraged by this too as well, is this, a lot of times this comes with most like, this is a really important piece for God also to step into it and like mark where we are, right, as we could say as well, is first you admitting, like from the first part, it's like the reason I'm leaning so heavily into my faith is also the humility in that situation to be like, well, look, hold on, first off, like we fell short, and this is why we're in this situation in the first place, right? Which we all need to do. That's what the Bible calls us to do, is like the first act of humility, to mark where I am, to admit where I am, instead of trying to defend my insecurity, because then I just sit there and run in that circle over and over and over and over and over and over, and I keep having the same cycles in my life because I'm trying to make my life not appear like what it really is, instead of admitting where I really am, so that we can make a change here, that we can grow here, that God can work in this situation, that He can step in and invade this area with light, and also to heal areas in my heart that led to these things in the first place. And so I wanted just to highlight that piece in the very beginning right there as well, is that you having that humility in the first place.
Well, it's like when it's the same thing with the Israelites leaving Egypt. When you're running from something, and things start to get tough, and the first thing you want to do is just bust a U-ey, turn it around. And like you were saying, it's like the mindset, the actions, how we were moving outside of parameters is what landed us here in the first place.
Same.
Right, and you can put that in like any facet of life, right?
For sure.
And if you have it on your window in there, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And you're sitting there, and you have to make the decisions, like, hey, are you going to keep doing the same thing? Or, hey, are you going to veer a different route? And for me, it was important, like, understanding, like, as a situation transpired, understanding what happens, like, okay, God, I got you. I'm listening. You got my attention.
You said, "Oh, that's all it took."
And so being faithful to His word, God's going to be faithful to his promises.
Yeah,
you know?
amen.
So if you're stepping outside of his covenant, understand he also tells you what happens when you step outside the covenant.
Yeah.
Now, when you come back under, and you're always under his grace, but when you kind of veer back on the path that he wanted for you or he has for you, you start to kind of see how things that you weren't able to do before, you can get through. They're manageable, or sometimes they're easy, or you get blessings expected out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so for us, it was the process that would have been, in my opinion, just not good. I want to use the word disastrous. Was made to where in reality, the relationship between me and her mother got closer, became really good friends, mended, got closer to God, and all the way up until we had the baby Jay was born, with worship music on in the hospital, and in a place of just love. Now, here comes the hard part, and here comes the enemy. Now after Jay was born, you have this period, it's 2 months, to where, she doesn't have these shots that essentially you need for her health and make sure she doesn't die when she steps outside.
Yeah, 100%.
And so, there's 2 months where we're...
PSA, not all vaccines are bad.
Yeah,
right?
not all of them.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Make sure you take care of your children.
Yeah, yes. Okay, there's no reason for them to die of something that, has been, polio or something like that.
Crazy
Something
from
wild.
The 1800s.
Yeah, we're good. We can get past that, yeah.
And so there it was like, okay, now the routine has shifted.
Yeah.
There's churches out,
Yeah.
Bible studies out. We're trying to.
And if you haven't, just context wise, I know a lot of people obviously have had kids in X, Y, and Z, but I also know there's a lot of people that haven't. And so one of the things is also too, maybe you even had a puppy and you had this thing as well, right? For example, when you have a baby of anything, right? You're usually your first month or so, right? Until they, like, for example, even with a puppy, I'll share my experience. I haven't had a kid yet, but even when you had a puppy, it's really important that in the very beginning that they have to get all their shots. They have to do all these things before they can go out and be in the world. And when I didn't follow that protocol, right, is I actually had a dog die on me years ago, right? Actually, before I got Bane. Was, again, my buddy was going out of town and he needed someone to watch his puppy and all these other things, right? And he was further along with his shots and them hanging out together, right? But again, along with it, it's like one of them had, was covered by these shots and these vaccines, and one of them was not. He was further along, right? So, and I think on the same note of that, right, is just I wanted to give the context that if you haven't had a kid, right, those early, month, 2 months, and even now, right, there's still a lot of situations, you're not going to bring her in, is like there is a need there to isolate and kind of, and be quarantined in some way, away from, the world. But again, it's also a way for the enemy to try to slip in because, it's harder to have community. It's easy to slip into, idolatry and because again, you're spending all this time and you're in place of really quickly honoring your kid, can turn into worship, right? And also can turn into your worth coming from
that.
Yeah, exactly. Coming from that, which can be huge. And then I was going to ask you this too as well before, we dive back into it as well. One of the things that I was thinking about is how, we don't look at faith and just foundational. I know this is so many funny because we're gonna have so many conversations about like foundation before, just laying some groundwork before we talk about a lot of these things. But for example, like faith isn't a check mark for me, right? It's not like I have faith or I don't. It's on a spectrum, and like how much do I trust God with these things, right? Because it's one thing to trust God with Him getting me to work today, right? It's a whole nother thing to trust God with God. Like I lost my job. I don't know how I'm gonna, my family. God, my kid is dying of cancer. God, to what degree do I trust God, right? And that's all on a spectrum, right? Or when, God has Abraham, hey, take your son to the top of the hill, and sacrifice him to me. Sure. Woo! You know what I'm saying? It's like, right? And if you haven't heard the rest of that story, first off, get in your Bible, all right? But also too, right, just, how much faith I have. And the reason I was setting that up is also to have this conversation is that in my experience, most of the time, that when there's an opportunity to deepen my faith, it first is brought to me usually from a mistake that I've made, or an area where I fell short, and I've kind of caused my own little mess here, right? That most of these things that are happening in my life, that like there's an opportunity that comes with that, is the leaning to God. Or maybe it wasn't my own. Maybe it's a setback that I've had in my life, right? Like something happened, a close family member passed away. It's like it had nothing to do with me, but at the same time, like, you know, through all of this, I have to lean into God and trust him through it, right? Like that, you know, I trust his character. When I can't see his hands, I know who he is, and I know, while I can't understand why, you know, these things are happening, or why it needed to happen now, or in the way that it happened, or what, you know, what the circumstances, why they're like this. I do know God, and I do know his character, and I know that he's going to use all these things, right, for good. And he's going to, and again, if it's not good, it's not done. He's not done. And like keeping that perspective in mind is typically when I have, and now I see those moments as this is a chance for me and God's relationship to go to a different level.
Yeah.
Because I have an opportunity right now to either lean into my faith,
Yeah.
right, or lean away from my faith, and either try to take control, right, which this is the reminder for me too. I don't know if you feel like this too, is I many times have leaned away from my faith. And the more times I've done that, it has built up conviction in me that is the wrong route to take, right? And it doesn't lead to life, and it leads to me causing destruction, it getting worse, you know, me, you know, putting myself in places of anxiety or depression, or worry, doubt, all these other things, right, that lead to just worse and worse places and darker places, rather than like how quickly can I give that to God, and know that, you know, when I do that and I trust him, and I lean into my faith, I also now have enough experience of knowing where that road leads. And I think that that's also, you know, for me, a lot of times where it starts with faith is, you know, putting him, really, if you bottle it down, getting put in situations where I get to pick if I want to trust him or not. You know, and
I think that's the beauty about God, and anybody having questions about that, it's like that's it right there. It's like he gives you the choice.
Yeah.
And
what do you mean? He didn't just force us? No one forced.
Crazy.
Hey, I'm a grown man. Ain't nobody forcing me to follow God.
Absolutely. You know, I love it when people hit me with that one. But I think that's the beauty in it. It's like he gives you the choice, but then you also have to remember. And I was telling Jess, Jana's mother, this, is that you have to understand God's faithful with both sides.
Amen.
You know, and so if you
Amen.
If you understand, you know, how God will work, he's going to be faithful to his word, both positive and if you deem it negative, negatively, have a human perspective would deem it.
Thank God he's a man of his word. You know? Thank God he's a man of integrity. Thank God that God is who he is.
Imagine if he wasn't. Imagine all the things that, like you always say, like he's protected us from, all the things that he's defended us from that we don't even know.
He protected me from me.
You know, all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
You know?
And I think there's beauty in that once you figure out that, like, God's giving you the choice to follow him. God's giving you the choice to, even when you mess up, to come back home. Yeah. It's just, you know, like if you don't have kids, or even like my dog Marley, like so
sweetheart,
she had an accident on the floor today. She has an upset tummy. But even, you know, knowing that she thinks she's in trouble, right? But I'm like, you know, come here. Just come here. Everything's okay. And so, you know,
you're sick.
Even in our head, we're sick with sin, right?
Yeah.
God's telling us, hey, just come here. Like, I got you. You know, the worst thing she could do is, you know, go elsewhere or go away from me, have another accident where I can't take her out or defend her or whatever, you know.
You literally, I think you hit such a big thing right there, right? Is God isn't looking for example, he doesn't rank us by who's more obedient. Right? It's a heart condition, for example, in that scenario, right? The reason that it's a very different thing. Let's say Marley wasn't a dog. Let's say that Marley was a human, right? And someone makes a mistake, right? And think about this with your relationships with, you know, people, if you're listening to, is, for example, if like Jurell made a mistake, and he comes to me, and it might have hurt me, right? I always give this example, right? Is that you might have not intentionally meant to step on my foot, but unintentionally you stepped on my foot. Yeah, it still hurt, man. It still hurt, right? But when you make a mistake, Marley makes a mistake, goes on the ground, right? And then she comes back with humility, right? And she comes back and she's like, I'm sorry, like I made a mistake, right? Is the same thing as a human. If they came back and they're apologizing, right? They in their heart, they really have humility, like they didn't mean to do that, just like when someone accidentally steps on your foot. When someone intentionally steps on your foot and then does it again and they have no remorse on the other side of that, right, that's a very different situation. And so I think about that when it comes into like obedience or some of these other things, right? It's like if she intentionally just like picture, well, I guess you got a female dog, but like, again, like your dog like goes to the bathroom on the wall and like is like intentionally doing it, like, yeah, like I'm marking my spot, right? Comparatively to like my stomach, like that, like I was trying to get you to take me out, like all these other things, like I don't feel good, all those other things, right? Like you have grace, you have mercy, you have all these other things in those moments. It didn't mean that it didn't hurt. It didn't mean you didn't have to clean it up. It didn't mean all those other things, right? But I think that that's really important when we look at that relationship with God as well, right? Is that we're not sitting up here like on a scale of weighing bad and good, like. It far outweighs opposites. We're far more bad than we are good, and again, and we got to remember we're not the one holding the scale. We don't get to weigh our, we don't get to weigh our sin compared to the good that we put into the world, right? It's not a scale like that. Like the only thing that makes our scale of good lopsided, right, onto the good side is because we got Jesus with us, not because all these works and all these things that we think that we did to outweigh, all these bad things that we've done or things that we've fallen short in. All the messes that we've created, right? And I think on the same side of that is more, God's looking for a willing heart, right? And you can look at that, for example, when you look back when God gives the parable about the wedding, right? And he invites everybody, right? And what that invitation is to the believers, right? Like to the Jewish people that are waiting on the Messiah to come. And, he sends out this wedding invitation, right? But being so prideful and also too, like, I don't make mistakes. I meant to pee on that wall. Like I meant to have this, like I meant to like X, Y, and Z, right? Like all these things, or to act like, you're walking around like nothing, that you are perfect and that everything's figured out, is like understanding first of having that humble heart, like again, in which the Bible talks about, like, the beginning of wisdom is fearing the Lord, is to have reverence, right, and respect and understand where we sit, right, where we sit in this world, that understand that we're not level with God, right? Like it's not, we're standing at his right hand, and like, again, I don't know about you, Jurell, I don't have the ability to snap my fingers and create a universe. I don't have the ability. I don't have the ability, to create a whole living race and make sure that I sometimes I sit outside and I just think about like all the things God has taken care of, like the animals he's feeding when no one's watching, like also the integrity he has when no one's around, and the beauty that he's created, and when nobody might ever see what he's doing, yet he still does it anyways. The majority of what God is, no one sees. There's a full universe out there of him doing things every single day that we don't see, and the hearts that he's healing and where he's moving. And I think that this is a big thing for us is to remember, is like that's why when you think about just faith, is then you tie that back into the mustard seed, right? Like it's like the faith of a mustard seed, like the size of a mustard seed, is like, God, all I have is that willingness and humility to admit that I'm wrong, right? And that what you have for me is greater than what I have for me, and my trust and willingness to follow you. And to submit and to surrender and all those things. And it doesn't matter if I'm CEO or I'm a homeless guy, or if I'm, again, rich or poor, or this political party or that political party, or if, whatever, right? It doesn't matter if I'm in jail. It doesn't matter if I'm, it doesn't matter if I've murdered somebody, or if I've, started a nonprofit that's based, for God. And we can see that in real time when it looks at the Bible, how people view God when they don't read their Bible and when they do read their Bible are completely two different things. Because a lot of people see Jesus and they think, oh, religion, all these other things, where when Jesus came like,
I came to destroy religion.
woo, he was lighting the church up, right? Like most of what he's saying is condemning the church for the actions that they're doing. And then also too, bringing them from condemnation to say, hey, like, again, like, come to me, right? And all of these, we can clean all of these things. We can get this actually working the way that I designed it to flow before we humans made a mess of it. And yeah, us humans do a really bad job of impersonating God. And so, we just fall dramatically short when we actually realize. I think the only way that you can start to put yourself lateral to God unconsciously is because you don't really know who he is. And when you, because again, the closer I get to God, the more I realize how much I fall short. And because again, I understand his character, right? And I'm with, as I spend more time with them, just like if you get around somebody and let's say they're super talented at something, it's different when, you watch them on stage. Like for example, let's say you came and showed up and you don't know how to play guitar, and then you see me playing guitar and say, which I don't know how to play. Well, yeah, I could strum a couple chords, all right? That's all I got, Jurell. But my point is like, let's say you came and I was a musical artist, right? And you come and you watch me perform and you're just like, wow, like what a talent, right? But also too, that's when he's on stage, right? And that's when it sometimes is very blatantly obvious in certain situations, right? With something dramatically, something happens in your life and you watch somebody and you watch them walk through it and you go, wow, like, I don't know how they have that strength. I don't know how they're getting through that like that. I don't know how they still have love for others and grace and how they're still operating, how they're still walking, how they're still, still have, calm and peace during this time. And sometimes in those moments it's really blatant, right? But there's also many moments, right, where it's not, right? And sometimes, and what I mean by that is like, we have to walk with somebody. And when I'm walking with God, right, it's not what makes God magnificent is not what he does in one moment. It's what he's doing in every moment, all the time, right? Like I always say it out there, out there where we're training hitters. It's like anybody could do it once, right? It's like you can put on a little magic show that tries to impersonate God with the power that he gave you, and yada yada yada. But like God is in all places all the time, working in all moments. He don't get tired, like so he's omnipresent. Like there is nowhere and there is nothing happening that is not underneath like his vision, underneath his foresight, right? And so like understanding that as a principle, I think becomes, massive for us just to understand like, like I don't want to be in control. Like I don't want, as much as that, the small G in me, the small God in me, right, wants to be in control. When you really see the size of God and the power of God and what he can do, and then you realize that size and that powerful God is for you, why would you want to be in control? It's the opposite way. It's like, I want you in control. Because first off, I make messes. I mess all these things up. I also, too, the ways that I'm going to choose and how I think I'm going to find healing and the ways that I think that are going to be better. And when that person claps at me and I want to clap back and be witty and I, under my own understanding. When I'm leaning on my own understanding instead of leaning on my faith, well, that's going to lead to a lot of destruction, right? And again, that's when it goes back to as you live your life that way and then you look back at what God has told you and his wisdom that he told you, it's like, oh, that's why he was telling me. He was putting me on game. Why he was telling me to live my life this way, not because it was for him, right? Because, again, God doesn't need anything from you. Like, he wants everything for you. And so when you get back in this place, you realize that he was putting you on game the whole time, and you thought, here you are projecting onto God, right? Well, it's like, that person just wants control. They just want me to act this way. They just want me to behave. They just want me to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no. That's the different God.
Human side, too, it's like what we sometimes or argue against God and that the control thing is like, as humans, like that's really what we want. Like, we want to be in control. We feel like we know what's best. We feel like, and that's, talking post Jay being born, over those 2 months, it was a lot of those conversations with God. It was like, all right, hey, we both not sleeping. Our lives has transitioned completely. Routine's out the window. At that point, things start happening, and a perfect opportunity, right, for the enemy, and things start happening little by little, week by week, day by day. and you start to say like, okay, like we're not even close to the same space where we were a couple months ago. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And
You mean by your relationship with God,
well,
or
it was going on when I'm talking about with me and mom.
got it?
Throughout the pregnancy,
Yeah.
baby's here, and it's like, okay, now
The honeymoon disappears.
things
Yeah,
are,
baby's born. All the dopamine's got there. Great. Now we got real life.
now
what's
life's
up?
happening.
Yeah.
And now we have to figure out how to play nice together in each other's lives. And so I think that throughout that, there's a lot of those conversations with guys like, okay, clearly I'm not in control, and clearly I don't really have a when I do have a say, or I think I have a say, and I do put my hands on things, I'm messing stuff up. And so, like, what are we doing here? And I think it's okay for people to understand, like, you can have those conversations with God.
Yeah.
You can talk to him. You can ask those questions.
Trying to hide your mess.
Yeah.
Over things. He already knows.
He knows what's going on.
Yeah. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere at the same time. You're not hiding anything
Exactly.
from God. He knows where your heart's
and
at.
be open and honest, and because he knows what's happening.
Yeah.
And so it's through that though, but that then leaning in.
Yeah.
That then getting into the word, that then praying, that then worshiping.
Well, and then we talked about earlier, right? Like a different level of trust, right? Like, okay, I trust God, and it was just you. Now you got a little baby girl, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you trust me, but do you trust me? How about to raise her? Do you trust?
Yeah.
Do you trust me to surrender? The relationships, the external circumstances, all these things that you can't control, right? Because really along with that, especially as you start going out into the world, right? You're driving down the car, like, great, you can control your car to an extent, right? But again, like, it's raining outside and there's other people around you and they got their own life, like, and God's orchestrating all of this.
Whatever he has planned.
Right? And do I trust him even with that, which is, again, very easily going back to what we talked about before, getting bamboozled by the blessing, right? He blesses me with a kid, and then I start trying to hold the kid and I start trying to control the blessing and going, no, God, like, not this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is my thing. And then I start worshiping the thing rather than I should be going, you ain't taking my God, not this thing, right? God should be the thing that I'm holding like that. God should be the thing that it's like, no matter what, again, everything moves around my relationship with God and being God-centered, and saying, where next, God? Waking up in the morning being like, God, this is your life. Like, how do you want to use me today? Right? This, like, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Right? And like getting to that place. And I think that is, huge, because it's so easy. All of a sudden you realize when you're looking around, like, you've been doing this great for you, having a little baby girl. For somebody else, it's a job that God gave them. Mm-hmm. To somebody else, it's a boyfriend or girlfriend that God gave them. To somebody else, it's, again, it could be money, it could be, things, it could be a job, it could be, whatever, right? Like, whatever those things that is, that the blessing, something that you've been praying for, maybe it's health of your mother or something like that, right? And we start realizing that it's like, then I start holding this thing tight and saying, God, you could have anything else but this. And God's like, you forgot. And
All of this mine.
so I think this is we've talked about this too, and I've used this analogy before we talk about this, is like, it's like if you do have kids, it's like buying food for the family at McDonald's or something like that, right? Jurell, think of something healthier. But in any case, we're at McDonald's, right? And we buy food for the family, right? And then you're like asking your son in the back, you're like, hey man, let me get one of those fries out of his thing. And he's like, no, like, you can't have any of my fries. Like, boy, I bought you them fries. Like, those are my fries. You know what I'm saying? But that's what we do with God. He gives us a blessing. He blesses us, right? And then he asks for it back, right? One, because we start to idolize and hold on to it, right? The other thing with that as well is because he's got more for us. He's abundance. He's like, yo, I'm trying to move you along. I'm trying to give you what is even better than what you currently have. You have no idea because you want to hold on to what you got. Right? You want to hold on to these fries. You want to hold on to these things, and you think I'm taking something from you. When in reality, remember, like, I'm blessing you and I'm the blesser. Like, I got more for you. I'm abundance. Like, I'm love. Like, I'm for you and not against you. And when you, like, I'm the beginning and the end. Like, what I have for you is far greater than what what you want or what you think you need. And then we got to think of this too. Like as a kid, we are kids in our faith, and understanding that God has a much higher conscious, than us, right? We got to humble ourselves, like have fear for the Lord in that same way. It's just like how big and massive and how big you are is that what you have for me is obviously far better than anything that I could even control. And if we can't humble ourselves of understanding that, then I think the big thing is you're not close enough to God because you're too far away to even see. Like it's if you think about this, to see that God is bigger than you, that's such a small, that's such entry level. Then when you realize how much bigger than you he is.
Well, it's like it's the perspective thing, right? When you're at a distance from something giant, it doesn't look that big.
I like that.
But as soon as you step up close to it, now you're looking up 50, 60 feet. When
Mount Everest.
Exactly. When from a distance, your perspective was, it's not that big. I can see it through my hand.
Yeah, it's not that big. Yeah, and then like you said, yeah, exactly. Like as you get closer to God, you go,
oh, he's giant.
Wow. This is the thing, right? You walk up, it'd be like, again, like Mount Everest or something like that, right? Like that's not even big enough, right? And we're talking about the creator of Mount Everest, right? But again, walking up, think about that. We walk up to how big God's creation is and we go, wow, this is big. And that's something God created. Like that's, so we walk up, like this is the thing. You look to your left and right. When you get up closer, you get to God and you look left and right and you go, I can't see your end. I can't see how tall you are. I can't see how deep you go. I can't see how wide, I can't fathom. God, I'm going to walk 300 miles that way and there's going to be no end of you. I'm going to walk 300 miles the opposite way and there's going to be no end of you, right? I don't know where you end. And God, keep revealing how large you are to me, because when I see how big you are, it humbles me and changes my heart, how I think, right? And spiritually, and also my physical health, everything, when I start leaning into you, right? And it also makes my problems seem crazy small, right? When I see how wide God is, how high he is, all these other things, it makes my problems seem insignificant. Yeah. Not because there isn't things that are happening and not because there isn't an emotion that I need to process, but when I realize how big my God is and how small my problem is, I realize that God can overcome my problem, right? And I think that is a massive thing, is to continue to do that and to get closer to God, because we start to forget that, right? We start to walk away, right? And, we start to, like you said, start to look back and go, is God really that big? Or, man, this problem seems a lot bigger because it's closer to me. I'm really close to my problems.
And
yeah.
Another one, when you're walking with God, so again, without problems, like you just said, problems may look pretty big from a distance, but as you're walking with God and you and God get closer and closer and closer to the problem shrinks.
Yeah.
And now the thing that you thought in your life, the burden, the stress, whatever, becomes insignificant.
Yeah.
In comparison to what God had for you.
I literally, now that you when we talked about that with the distance, it's so interesting because I have this image in my head where the thing is my problems are always close. You know what I'm saying? My problems are always close, but when I'm standing next to God and I'm close with God, the problem looks smaller.
Yeah.
But when I walk away from God, the problem is still close. There. So then I look for God and he looks so far away, or he looks so small. My problem looks so big because it's always with me. It's here, right? I just have nothing to refer it to.
You think your problem's bigger than God.
Yeah, and I'm looking at me. I'm looking at me and go, that problem looks real big compared to me. What am I going to do, right? And Goliath starts looking real big. David's like, man, I'm kind of small. Goliath looking real big over there, right? The only reason that, and again, going back to that story, is remembering that David didn't have confidence. Or he didn't walk into that feeling big because he was all big and mighty. He said, man, I got God with me. God just told me that I'm going to be king. Yeah. I can't die today because God already showed me that I'm going to be king. And he had such faith. And also, too, this other thing, God had already blessed him previously. He already had God close with him. He's out there fighting. Everybody wants to talk about, everybody wants to talk about Goliath. This man was taking down bears. This guy was taking down lions. You're just a human, bro. I was fighting a raw animal in the middle of the field with no help. We got other people around here too. Someone could step in. This ain't nothing. This ain't nothing. right? And then, like I said, he was powered and had the confidence where it's like, man, I got God with me. Like, I don't need this armor. I already have my armor.
Who was this Philistine?
Yeah, who is this? What are y'all standing around looking scared? You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the difference there is like, as well as like, again, like, okay, well, our problems are always going to be close, right? We get to choose how close God is. Like that's the difference between our problems, the character of our problems, right? And the character of God is God won't force us to be close. Your problem will force you to be close. God, the enemy wants that problem will it'll keep hitting you over and over and over again, right? The symptoms of the problem are everywhere, right? And the enemy's trying to highlight those things, right? Like, for example, let's say you don't have a car, right? And you're like, man, all these things. It's like, man, I can't go to work. I can't go to the store when I want to. And it's like all these scenarios are going to keep popping up. And the people, like, you're going to have people in your life. It's like, man, you still don't have a car. Yep. But the problem is going to be close. You're going to have far less people, right? Especially if you're in the wrong environment. And also, too, if a lot of that, it's like God's not going to force himself on you, right? He's a gentleman, right? Like, he's going to wait for you to invite him in. And also, too, not only there's another layer of this, I've thought about like this. Like, God's going to wait for you to invite him into your house, right? That's one layer. I've invited people into my house. It's another thing to invite him into your bedroom. Another thing to invite him into your bathroom, right? It's also another thing to invite him into these areas, like, into intimate spaces. And another thing to have, someone's in my house. It's a whole nother thing to invite someone into a conversation with you about something that really bothers you, that is deep, that is intimate, that is all like, and again, like, he's not going to push. He's not going to invade. He's not going to insert himself into the conversation. He's waiting for your invitation. And that's the thing is like, that's where it becomes a spectrum is like, oh, I've invited God in my life. Okay, like, in what areas? How about when something comes up, right? It's like, oh yeah, like, God, you're good in all these other areas, but when it comes into my intimate relationship with my lover, no, that's just me and them. Or when it comes to my relationship with my mom, that's just me and her. You don't know what she did to me. You don't know how she did this. You don't know how the way she treated me. God, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, first off, God does. God does, right? But God is actually in that same way is like, he's the only one that can understand. Yeah. To that level. That's what I love about, and we're going off on roots of different branches, but one of my favorite things about my relationship with God is like, I don't need to explain it to him. No. If I'm explaining, it's because I need to get something off my chest, not because I'm enlightening him. Jesus don't need any of my knowledge, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. He knows exactly what's happening in my life. He knows what's going on in that other person's heart and my heart, the circumstances of everything, even what I'm feeling, what they're feeling, why we're having all of that.
Even
like,
if you try to do the Saul justification. God, I did this because it was for your glory.
Yeah, for your glory,
I was
God.
disobedient for your glory, Lord.
Yeah. Listen, even when we believe it, even when we believe our lies, God don't. All right? So he knows our heart. He knows why we're making the decision we're making and what's holding us back in our circles and those things. And then also, again, along with that, one thing I've been really leaning into this last year, and I was even doing this last night too, is I like talking to God about people. I fell into the habit, a large part of my life of talking to people about people. The problem is like people are giving me their perception about people. I don't want people's perception about people. I want God's perception about that person. Yeah. And so God softens my heart when I start talking to him because he shows me how he views them, right? And when he reveals to me, he reveals and softens my heart of, I start going these things like, I can't believe they treated me this way. Why would they do this? Blah, 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 blah. And why didn't they do this? And if I was them, I would have done these other things. And then God reveals this whole other thing and being like, Joey, like, they're young. Or, again, like, remember how they grew up? Or you remember, like, blah, blah, blah. They're just operating out of this other space. They're hurting right now. They're in pain. They're all, and when he reveals from his perspective what's going on, like, again, like, I see his grace for them. I see his mercy for them. I see his love for them. I see all those other things. And when he opens that other aspect, and again, it doesn't mean that after me and God talk that I ain't going to call you. It doesn't mean that after God talk, I'm not going to call Taylor, right? Again, that community to have his word. I rely on you guys as you surrender into God. Like, I rely as God to speak through you and be a mouthpiece for him as well. And also, too, I ask you guys to hold me accountable to those things like, hey, you did it to me the other day where you're like, hey, I know that this is, something you asked me to hold you accountable to. And, I know how you're going to feel after this. And that reminder to, like, lean back into God. And I think we talk about it like it's a one-time thing. Oh, I get baptized, get my thing, and then all of a sudden I'm just godly and running around, and that's the end of it, right? And how sad that would be too. Like, I love having a relationship with God all day long, like your best friend. It's like if you and your best friend came together and it's like, oh yeah, we're best friends, and then that was it, and y'all don't talk every day, and you guys don't like it would just happen years ago. It's like that wouldn't be your best friend. Right? So it's like with God in the same way, it's like, yo, I enjoy having life with you. Yeah. I enjoy having a relationship with you, right? And spending time with you. And it's not just when I need something either, right? Because that's also a shallow relationship. Yeah. Like, you know, like the same thing, you know, when you have those relationships, like when something good happens in your life, the first person you want to call, the first, you know, like good things happen, bad things happen, when you're just on a daily, like in and out of your life, like that's my relationship with God. Now, we grew that relationship. That was definitely not how it was, right? He wasn't the first person I wanted to call. He's not the first person I wanted to cry to. He's not the first person I wanted to go to with a lot of these things. But we grew with that relationship, just like you grow a relationship with your best friends. Yep. It's the same exact thing, you know, and that being huge there. So like, you know, with you on that same side of those things, like currently, like marking you where you're at, right? What did you feel like there's been areas where you've had to already like surrender those things back to him, like just in the blessing that he's already given you? Is there been things that have come up already that you've had to, like, he gave you this blessing and you've had to, you know, give him back over control, or, you know, how does that look like for you?
I mean, for me, I think it's a daily reminder with her of, I said this the other day, don't want to sound too morbid. I have become so conscious of like my life, and like what I'm doing and what I need to do now. Mine says like what I need to do for her. Yeah. And so then I stop. I'm like, okay, like what did God tell you to do? And I think it's like giving up this internal struggle with myself of trying to, for me, it's achieve something, and understand that, you know, God's honoring my prayers. You know, I asked him to change my heart, and I said that repeatedly for years and years and years. And I said, okay, God, whatever you're doing right now is taking me to that, you know. And I always, there's a book that I read, Jay. You know, at the end of it, it says, you know, you're making me the father I hope I would be. And I think about like that with God. It was like each day, you know, whatever situation or circumstances or things that will happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like you're making me the man that you designed me to be for whatever purpose that you have for me. And
side bookmark right there is also like you talking about, like if you're looking for the ultimate warrior, right? Like for example, if we're going to war with another country, right? I don't want the guy that's never been to war and only read theory. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, so I want the guy that has experience, right? And so when we go into the same thing, like he's building those things because you've been to war and you've been through things. And we think that living a life with God is there's nothing bad's going to happen. Yeah, everything's going to go amazing, and everything's like, well, if God exists, all these other things, well then my life would just be perfect. And it's like, well, okay, first off, you're describing heaven. Okay, and yes, that there's a way to get there. There's a way to get there, right? But also with that being said as well, like the Bible doesn't describe this earth as heaven, right? It doesn't describe this place as heaven. It doesn't describe our life and like, you know, with these things. And also too, if you look at the Bible, that's first off, if you know Jesus' story, it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows when, you know, he the king of following God, right? That is not, that's the God that we've created in our head, right? And that's the God that is being, you know, preaching the same way. So then instead, we go into the, you know, that other piece. The reason I'm tying that back is, you know, you have these things happen in your life, and we ask, like, you know, like look at our own kids. If we wanted our kids to be, you know, tough and resilient and gritty and be able to, you know, push through life, that isn't by having a really nice, nothing happens when I'm a child, you know, again, along with that, like those kids are not prepared for the world. No. And so I think the opposite, you know, again, like for us to remember that too, is like, you want this character, you want this resilience, you want this grit, you want these other things, right? And also too, I know personally within me, like I've had people say that to me, just like, man, like the way that you work, or, you know, like you're so gritty, or you have all these things. How do you like, it's like, bro, you don't know.
Yeah.
Like the qualities are great. And I get like,
See the fruit.
I'm grateful for how God has put that in my character, but also too, you don't know what I had, like what God put me through, right? Or that God walked with me through to build that inside of me, right? Because I very easily, without God, could have also had a lot of bad things from those circumstances in my life, and I could have took a lot of, you know, I could have let a lot of toxic water inside of me. But again, we filtered those things, and it again gave me wisdom, and it gave me, you know, discernment, and it gave me a path where next time I've been here before and I know how to walk this other route, right? I have experience here. I know how to deal with these problems where, you know, again, along with that, everybody that's just avoiding those other things, it's like, again, you can't be the, you know, a general, right? You can't be a warrior up here, right? But not been through war, right? Like,
One step though.
right? And that's where the experience comes. And again, instead of, and the Bible preaches the opposite, we keep doing all these things trying to avoid problems and setbacks and X, Y, and Z. But like that's why.
Storm is for its
Yeah. The storms are what build my character, right? Like the storms are what make me, right? And you look back to that, it's like I've weathered these things before. That's why, again, in those situations, when things hit the fan, right? Like people are gonna look. And that's that same way of like, okay, hey, who's navigated through these seas before, right? And I want to, like, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be the guy, like, for example, if I've never been across that sea, I remember when we went to, I went out to, I've gone out to the ocean very few times on a boat that was like no land. You can't see no land out there. You're just in the middle of the ocean. Like there ain't no boat in sight. It's just you, right? And I think about in those scenarios, you're out there going, nah, I'm gonna drive the boat. Like, bro, bro, I want the captain.
Well, no,
I want the guy that's been here. Like the storm starts, all that other stuff. You just like, bro, captain, take the boat.
For deviate too far off, but it's like when we went to ABCA.
Yeah.
And driving in the snow, I was like, I know who's not driving is me.
Yeah. He said, listen, I've driven on hot desert.
Hot road.
Yeah.
I'm good on there. But the snow thing, no. You know, the boys that's been, you know, living in Utah or Colorado or, you know, trekking through the snow here, but like, y'all,
boy, I was in the snowshoe leather like this, just walking in the snow.
Not I.
Yeah.
But, you know, the second part of the question that you asked is tough because I think about this and try not to cry. But, you know, I think God, and if you read the Bible, you'll love Jesus' irony. A couple of years ago, I was talking to my sister about her kids. She has 3. And, you know, I told them, I was like, you know, I think it's so beautiful that God gives us the opportunity to create life just like he did. And I said, you know, and, you know, just like he gave up his son, we have to give up, you know, our children when they turn 18, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, thinking about it, like, well, sister, even before that, I was like, these kids aren't even yours. You know,
you got to give them up every day.
You're managing them.
Yeah.
They're God's kids. And so I think that part for me was understand, like coming to terms with it, still probably trying to, I don't even think I'm there, of coming to terms with like, you know, this is God's daughter. This is not your baby girl. You're here to manage her. You're here to love her. And whatever outcome and purpose or whatever God has for her life, and whatever it means, like you have to be okay with what God's doing. And it's your job to make sure she is as lined closely while she's under your covenant, mine, with God's purpose and word and all that. And so I think that part has been tough.
Well, you literally said that's such a good thing. I listened to this the other day too. It's like, you know, most people live their whole lives trying to own something they could never own. You know, when you die, they just take it back. Like, so, you know, again, along with it, like we're trying to own something that only God can own. Only God could have forever. You could borrow it for a period of time, if that's a relationship, thing, money, whatever it is, right? Even a kid, right? Like, great, but at the same time, like you can, it's not yours. Right? Like we borrow, we try to convince ourselves that it's ours, but we're really just renting it or managing it, right? And then we're handing those resources and we're handing them off to somebody else, right? Or they'll be here and then they'll be gone, right? And in reality, that's where a lot of anxiety comes from, thinking we can control it when it was never yours in the first place, and you can never own it.
Yeah.
Like, just because you took some money and on this earth and you purchased it, we think that gives us ownership. You can't sell something that's not yours, and it was God's. So we're all here selling something that is God's, right? And handing it to one another. Yeah. But really what we're purchasing is the right to rent this for a period of time, right? And those are all different contracts, right? Like, you know, for example, on the same thing, great, you leave the hospital and you sign the piece of paper that says that you're the dad. Yeah. You're really
my name.
Yeah. Great. Like, you're the assigned manager and you sign the paperwork, but it's this illusion that you have a lot more control than you really do. It's never really yours and you can't have it, right? And you really don't. You're just, you know, there to assist to do those things. And when we start taking ownership and we start thinking, you know, like I'm the creator because I created this baby and all these other things. It's also a delusion by the enemy, right? To like get us in this place where the illusion of control can really keep us captive, because this is the problem. Then when things don't go how I want them to go, well, if you're in control, well, this is you, bro. This is you, player. This is everything that could happen is now your problem because you want to be in control, right? And in reality, and trying to orchestrate the complexities that are really when we get past surface level and we understand like, again, you get in the car and you're like, this illusion of control. It's like, well, I'm driving, so we're safe. Are you? Are you really? Like, oh, you can control everything that's happening around you. You can make sure that guy's not drunk and running the light. Like, you picked that your tire, you're going to hit a nail on the road. It's going to blow out your front tire and the truck's going to flip. And it's like, yeah, like, do we have some degree of control? Sure. But again, on the same side of that illusion, right, is can keep us in this place where instead of, again, along with it, like knowing, you know, that God's in control and coming back to him and saying, God, like, you know, and again, that doesn't mean, of course, in our brains, again, we think that that means that everything's going to go well, right? And then we also, this is the other hard part, we think we know what well or good is.
It is.
You know, to
what?
To our understanding, right? Like instead of religion is us trying to make a God of who we think God should be, rather than learn. Relationship is learning who God actually is. And that's the major separation between the two, is man-made religion, right? Defining who God is, right? From our understanding.
We have to have an understanding as humans of who God is.
Yes.
You have to humanize it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is the silly thing too, is along with it. Okay. So you, the creation, are going to define the creator?
Makes sense.
Or does the creator define the creation?
No.
Right? When we go to God and we have a relationship with God, he tells us who he is.
It's funny, I give you this example. So Jess is with her son Micah, and we're getting out the car at Bible study yesterday, and she's asking him this question. Micah, so he needs to eat, right? And so she gives him the choice. Micah, do you want to eat your food, or do you want to go inside the church and play with your friends in the kids' church?
Oh, I'm gonna play.
Yeah, I was like, wow. I looked at her, I'm like, what do you think he's going to pick? Like, like, no, he doesn't want to eat. He wants to go play.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I'm like, just stop giving the man a choice and make sure he eats his food, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's funny like that because, you know, we think as the creation that we get a say. Like, no, like you get a choice. You don't really have a say.
Yeah. Or and even to the place of like, you should not, like, I literally at times, I swear to you, there's times where I go to God and I just tell God, I'm like, God, like, I don't even want to choose, bro.
I don't know what's best for
Like, make me a robot,
Yeah.
man. Like, I want to do exactly what you
You
want.
tell me,
I just
please.
want to be a soldier for you.
Say yes.
Like, I don't like. It's crazy to get to a place, right? Because I used to think the opposite, where it's like religion, they're trying to control you.
Yeah.
Where I'm asking God to control me.
Yeah, please.
I'm like, make me a remote control for you. Like, I don't want the free will. Like, I want my free will. I want
yours.
Yes, to be yours. I want it to be your will, not free will. And I'm thankful that you've given me the ability to choose.
Cool.
But now that I've given my life and I chose you already, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm good, player.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I know I'm gonna mess it up.
Switch the controls.
Yeah, I know it's gonna mess it up. Like, let it be you now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and like, I want you to perform surgery on my heart. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I want this to be like, I want you to take and because you leave it up to me. There's so many moments I'm weak. You know, I got you know, things get tough and I lose perspective and I'm not so smart all the times and I you know, I make a lot of dumb decisions and I you know, I'm emotional, you know, and I trust you more than I trust me.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you get to that, and I think that's the biggest thing too, like getting back to like the, you know, just faith there is like, faith is, I used to look at it like an emotion, right? But like, it's literally a constant choice, and it comes back to trust and going back, like, do I trust God to give him this? And this is the thing, just like relationship wise, like you build a relationship with people and you trust them with more and more things, right? Like we have, you know, can I trust you? Like, I mean, think about this on the same note of that, right? I mean, let's look at like this. I was looking at my phone like I was going to look at the year. Like, Jay, how long we known each other now? Like, I mean, what, like 8 years at least?
Yeah, close.
Yeah. So you look at that, right, and it's like, okay, there's been a certain level of trust that's been built out with that, right? But then you start getting into the situations where it's like, okay, like we go out of town and like, do I trust you to watch my dog? Mm-hmm. Well, for how long? Mm-hmm. For a weekend? Mm-hmm. And what circumstance? You know, all these other things. And then like, okay, how long we've known each other? It's like, you know, we get to a place like, you know, do I trust you to watch my kid? Mm-hmm. Skylar to this day has not let me drive baby Jay in the truck. And there has been plenty of situations where I could have, and it would have really helped him. But he's just like, yeah, he's just gonna stay with me, bro. Like, you know, like, and again, like very slim situations where it's like, you know, again, with something that means so much to you, mm-hmm. you know, and again, like you can know somebody for all these years and all these other things, and it's just like, yo, like, that's something that's got to be developed, right? Where it's like, okay, I trust you in this way with these things. And then also, too, there's a time on the same note of that where with God, there's so many times where I tell God, like, I'm choosing to trust you. I realize that my faith and my trust is a choice and not a feeling.
Yeah.
Because...
Or not an obligation.
Yeah, and not an obligation. I'm not just doing it because you said so. Mm-hmm. You know, as soon as you said so, like, I'm not lying to him. Like, again, I'm not hiding my internal heart condition. Like, I want to do something else. First off, I want to act a fool right now, right? Like, I'm really hurt right now, these other things, but I'm choosing, right, to trust you, even though I want to do something else right now, right? And you know, I think that is a major foundation. But again, it starts with, obedience first starts with trust, right? And then, you know, trust is also obviously intimately connected with faith, right? Because faith is the trust, right, that God is who he says he is, that he will do what he says he's going to do. And also, too, I believe, faith is I believe, right, those things, and it's a choice, not a feeling, right? Because if I think God's presence is dependent on if I feel him or not, well, then I'm going to be left with a lot of times where I feel like God's not around because I think that God is limited to a feeling. Yeah. And I think the thing I thought about the other day, I'm going to share this little nasty little nugget with you. I thought about this the other day. So we're going to do the thought experiment. We'll do it with everybody. Okay. All right. So everybody close your eyes. Okay. So, for example, right now, right? Like, we got Nikki P in the room, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if Nicole left the room or stayed in the room, would your feelings about if she was in the room or not dictate if, like, would that be precedent if she was actually here or not? It's not about if you feel her here, or that if her presence is not predicated on your feelings,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't mean that your feelings are not facts.
So I can't feel her here.
Yeah, right. You can open your eyes now. But I was just that thought process along with it, right? It's just because I can't see her, right? Just because I can't pick her up with one of my senses, I can't hear her. I don't hear her voice. I don't, she's not touching me. Like all these other things, right? You bring that together. That doesn't mean that she's not in the room, right? Like now I'm limiting God to a feeling, right? Like his presence is not predicated on my ability to perceive him.
Very human.
Right? That's just our human thought process there, right? And the same thing, we can see that just like in that simple analogies, right? It's like she could be literally in the room with me, right? And because I don't feel her, quote unquote, right, that I then deny that she's even in the room, right? And that's silly, right? And so like we understanding that God's presence is not predicated on my feelings. And that is, huge, and like understanding there as well. It's like, I believe that you are with me because you said that you're here. You said that you will always be here. And also too, you've never not been here. You've never not been in the room. You go with me everywhere, and you've always been in those things. And when I could feel you, you were still there, right? And so me understanding that, again, I'm leaning on your character, not on my feelings, right? I'm leaning on my faith, right? Not on my feelings.
Yeah.
And that being, huge in that moment, because, and again, how that leads me through a practicality, right? It's like, I can choose to believe, right? One thing that either leads me towards deeper darkness or towards light. And there's no in between. It's not, well, yeah, but there's like darkness, light, and then there's like this gray.
There's a shade.
No, either something's leading you towards God or away from God.
Yeah.
It's not, again, you're going, you're not going, it's like one of those, like you're picking a path, right? One leads this way, one leads the other way.
I'm not going straight.
Right? And so we think we can walk on this fence, right? Well, the problem is the fence is in the enemy's territory. The fence was made on his side. God has open borders that he welcome everybody, right? He's welcoming everybody to come in, right? The enemy's trying to keep you in. There's a difference. The fence is on his side, right? So he's got the fence trying to keep everybody in. And so you can't walk. You walking on the fence, like you're in the enemy's territory, right? And so I think that's the big thing of like keeping that in mind with like, God on the same way with that, right? Is there isn't our way, the enemy's way, and then God's way. Like if it's not God's way, it's the enemy's way, and or the enemy's deception to make you think that you're doing your way and not his way.
And your way is also oftentimes the wrong way.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when our hearts are in those conditions to do those things. So I think that's the thing is like, especially those moments is, again, I know how I would in this moment. I feel like I would like to respond. I even told you this too, the different thought process with it. But we talked about this the other day where you're like, I'm not a big believer. Even too, business partner always gives me a hard time about this too, is I don't trust my gut because I feel like my gut is feelings, and I don't trust my feelings. So I trust God and my conversations with God. And so again, along with that, it's like, where God's sending me, there's a lot of things that God has pushed me into that I felt I would have went the opposite direction. And when I'm leaning to where he sent me, I know where he sent me.
Yeah.
So like, there's many times where I felt my intuition, right? Which is really, I think in a lot of ways, like your gut feeling, like that's why the word feeling is behind it, is it's a feeling, right? And I don't trust my feelings. So it doesn't mean that sometimes that gut feeling isn't right. Great. Sometimes my feelings are accurate and they are right. A lot of times they're not, right? And so, and on the other end of that is like, instead of leaning into that and just, playing this like gambling, like I don't need to guess. I can just go to the creator. And also too, what I mean by that too as well, it's like, it doesn't mean like there's this voice from the sky going, Joey, turn left. Joey, hire that person. Joey, blah, 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 right?
Very helpful.
There's times where he's pretty blatant, right, with what I need to do. But and it sometimes is much more clear than other times. But my point is that a lot of times I'm asking God to speak in a way that he's already spoke to me, but I didn't listen. And what I mean by that is like, he's already told me what to do in this circumstance, because I'm reading his word. He already, I know God's character. Because I know God's character, I know what he would want me to do in this moment. I just might not like what he wants me to do in this moment. And that's hard for me. You know, it's like he asked me to be bold, and it's hard to be bold. He asked me to follow him and pick up my cross, and that's hard. And I don't like it all the time. And there's times when I'm doing things and I'm sacrificing for God, right? Like giving him my French fries, that I'm hungry. And I don't want, and these are my fries. And I love
some fries.
I really love this, thing he gave me. And I love this thing. And also too, like, we should love what God gave us, but not more than God. And that's where, again, the same thing with it. It's like, imagine the same thing. Just imagine this, you that have kids. Imagine getting your kid a teddy bear and they love the teddy bear more than you.
Betrayal.
It's silly. It's silly. And that's what we do, like kids, like little kids, is we start holding on to what he gave us harder than the one that gave him to us. Right? And let's say that's like the same thing too. Like, again, like there's these bigger blessings, especially like relationships in our life. Like, it's a very easy way for us. Like idolatry most of the time is a person in our life, right? It shows up a lot as people, especially like relationships nowadays as well, which is also why, you look at that. I don't know if you saw in my story yesterday where that pastor actually pulled the statistics of like husband and wives that pray together and how often they get divorced. So the statistics were, so we know right now, like it's over 50% divorce rate just in general across the, I think is that just the United States, I think?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure.
It's like 52.
Yeah. So it's like over 50%, right? It said that couples, the study was that couples that pray together consistently out loud get a divorce one every 1,152 people. It's like less than 1%. It's like dramatic, right? So you look at that as like over 50%, right? Comparatively to couples that do this, right? And like statistical evidence of like, this is a different way of life. Like these marriages look different, right? And by keeping God centered, or obviously, the opposite way. And then also too, that's just divorces how many people that are divorced but are not by the state? Yeah. They're not living together, right?
It costs too much money.
Yeah, it costs too much money. They still get the tax benefits. They're older. How many people also too, okay, great, they're not living together. How many people are emotionally divorced but living in the same house?
Yeah, you probably add like another 7 to 8%.
Right? So now you're looking at it that really, when it comes to society, when they do it their way, it's probably something like, let's say 30% maybe, right, that actually like stay together. And also too, okay, of that 30%, how many of them are that Christian relationship that we talked about on the other side of that?
Assume the majority.
Majority, right? Majority. So when we do it our way, almost every single time it ends up in divorce, right? And broken relationship and all those other things. And everybody's like,
free game for couples.
Yeah, I want want some facts to hit with as well. It's like, look, God's like, again, true wisdom is shown by its results.
Yeah.
I forgot what psalm that was. But yeah, true wisdom is shown by its results. As we look in it from that way, it's like, true wisdom is shown by his results, player. Like, those stats don't lie.
Yeah, check the stat sheet.
Like, those stats don't lie. Also, too, I think I told you this a little while back, is there was this atheist that did a study. He was a scientist. He was an atheist. Who he wanted to prove that, like religion, Christians, all those, specifically Christians, is that his theory was that they weren't, because he was very like self-righteous, like in the sense of like pro-earth, human, all these people, like all this kind of this, just like man, like humanitarian, like really leaning that way and going like, there's no way, like he was out to disprove that disproportionately that Christians don't give the most. And his study actually came back the opposite. So it came back that Christians are actually the most giving. And it was actually crazy that they actually published, because it was the opposite of what he wanted from his observation, but that Christians were the most giving, right? And they gave the most financial resources, and they gave the most food, and they gave and all these other things. And it's like, again, like, you want some facts. Like you want like God's wisdom is like, it's in the numbers. Like it's in the numbers that, and not to say that every Christian's so giving, and not to say that every Christian is all these perfect people or any of these other things. It's like, no. It's a representation of who they're following. And also too, we all fall short. Like again, I'm asking, you perfect, Joe?
I ain't perfect.
Okay, I was just checking again. I was just checking. I ain't perfect, boy. So I'm just checking. It's not to say that, and again, along with it, like this isn't like pro-religion, yada, yada, yada. I'm talking about people that have a relationship with God move different.
Yeah.
And you should move different. Right? You should have more, you should have different fruits in your heart.
Yeah.
You should respond different ways. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean that you're Jesus. Again, leave the humanity in there, right? Leave room for us to make mistakes and to do all those other things. But like for us to also go back to our base and just understanding that like, yo, this isn't all fairy tales and you know, things. And I was saying this, last night with God and, also, too, Taylor, have your rabbit ears as an update here. There's a guy that sits in our group. His name is Fabian. I'm going to give my boy some love. Man, like, I was talking to God about him last night. He shared such a... I pray all the time that God shows me him moving. You know, I want to see him move, right? And we think of it like... A lot of people think like, you know, magic trick, this and that. I'm talking about like real life change. I want to see you really spiritually like change somebody in front of me. You know what I'm saying? I want to see you have breakthrough. I want it to be, you know, all these things. And so I've been praying that. And last night was another scenario where through this man that you would not think it's got God's signature all over it, right? If you know God's character, like he's got God's character all over him, right? And it's the opposite of what a lot of people would think and a lot what religion would think. Fabian was a drug addict. He died, like for a large period of time. Like they revived him, but he was dead, done, overdosed, killed himself, dead. They revive him. He comes back, and starts running to God, right? Comes back to God. Somebody helped him. One of his friends, she was deeper in her faith, helped lead him towards God. His family had been coming to our Bible studies. He starts popping up. He starts coming to Bible studies. We're talking about God. He's really quiet. Still in the corner, doesn't really talk much. Literally his first Bible he's ever had. He's got it there. Doesn't know where any of the books are in the Bible. I mean, like, when you say, like, oh, you need to know all these things, you need to walk with God, all these other things, like, no. Like, listen to the story of, like, what God did right in front of us. Is he comes back, again, doesn't know where anything is in the Bible. We're helping him read. He didn't, like, I remember, it's funny because I know where he is right now, he's kind of doesn't even want to be there, right? He starts growing in his faith, has a setback, relapses, disappears from the Bible study groups, didn't show up for months, gets in trouble with the law, shames himself. He's like, I can't go back to God. Like, he already saved me once, kind of like the Mary story, like, he already saved me once. I know better. I know that, like, I've heard all these other people. He doesn't show back up. So a couple months passed. All of a sudden, he pops back up. Comes in really humble, admits to us he slipped, you know, and that he's battling through it. You know, this was months ago now. Keeps coming. And then, man, like, over the last couple weeks, like, now probably like the last 2 months, bro, he just started, all of a sudden, he's just quoting random Bible verses. Like, knows where they are. It's like, oh yeah, like Genesis 10, blah, blah, blah. And just like, what? Okay. Right? And then he's just talking about certain things. And I'm like, okay. Like, start knucking him up. I'm like, look at you reading your Bible, boy. Like, and we start having all these conversations and things, right? So let me hear it. This is what he shared with us last night. He goes, yeah, you guys remember, because he's talking about months ago. This is before he relapsed. He's like, you guys remember when I was talking about that girl that led me to help me with my faith, right? He's like, she lost somebody really close to her, and she walked away from God. He goes, so the last couple, this gave me a chills thinking about it. He said, so like the last month, I've been reaching out to her, and we've been having Bible studies, and she's walking back to her faith now. And we try to move on with the conversation. And I said, hold on. I said, hold on. So we're going to have to talk about this for a second. I said, bro.
Yeah, perspective.
You were dead.
Yeah.
You didn't follow God. Everybody would look at you from a religious standpoint, that people view it from that other side, and go, God can't use you. Like, you're worthless. You're so far from God. There is no use. Like, you're not a big impact on the church. You're not the guy that we think of when we think of faith, or what that looks like from the hierarchy of like within the church, and what someone that holy looks like. And I was like, meanwhile, here you are, dead. God brings you back to life. You fall short, slip, and then he, again, mercy, grace, again, like literally playing in your life. And then heart, without even thinking about it, again, he's going back trying to help, like, yo, you brought me to God. Like, how am I not going to be here for you? Like, that's where his heart, like, I'm like, okay, if we look at that, and we're talking about less than a year, right? Where this man is, where he was, right? Like, in the streets, like, hard drugs, all those other things. And then life change to, you're bringing people, not a new believer, you're bringing someone that actively went away.
Decided to.
And also, too, you having the courage and the humility.
And the
boldness to come back to someone that brought you to faith. Mm-hmm. And then you become their guide back for them to come back. And so when I'm in the shower last night, and I brought that up at Bible study, I was like, we ain't gonna run past that. Like we all like, we're celebrating in the group. But then I was in the shower last night, and I go, I'm literally just saying to God over and over again, like,
you said you asked.
I see you moving, bro. Like I see you. Like that is your signature all over it. And we talk about, and you want to think about this, and I'm because the enemy wants to downplay that, right? And have him run right past that, and also to us to run right past that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is going like, think of how many things in your life that you've been trying to change for years, decades, doing the same stuff, running the same circles. Like if you also too, and again, I know that like Taylor's probably in there, the same thing is like having that thing, is if you've been around drug addicts and you've been around like the battles that they have and have relationship on that other side, and what they're battling through and how they're trying to come from how far they are. And then also you look at the biblical wisdom of God saying the same thing as well. It's like the lukewarm.
Spew you up.
Yeah. Like he went from far extreme to all of a sudden being God's warrior, right? And being a resource that God uses, right? In less than a year, less than a couple like months, where like, and then just to hear how he talks now and all these other things, I'm over there talking to God and being like, yo, like there ain't no plan, there ain't no psychologist, there ain't no, they're like God, you are mighty, like you are big, you are huge, like you changed lives, like, you know what I'm saying, like I see you in front of me, like, you know what I'm saying, like I'm over there, like I see you, like that doesn't happen, like what you did, the surgery you did in that man's heart, like I see it, and like, and other people might run right past it and do whatever. It's like I see you, like I see you, and I see that you did something in his life, right? And also too, and then I told him this afterwards. We talked afterwards, and he was just telling me like, you know, just because you know, again, it hasn't been easy, right? The same thing too. He's trying to turn his life around, but he's hurt a lot of people, and you know, so a lot of people doubt he's relapsed. He's relapsed now, and you know, along with it, and I told him, it's like, you know, like he's a lot of people that have crabs that are trying to pull him back into the bucket of that old life. And man, he's come so far just in a couple of weeks with that. But one of the things that we talked about there too, I was like, look, and I just wanted to encourage him too. I said, bro, like, I know you look, you know, wants to look at me across the table and being like a mentor for him within his faith and go, oh, well, I have nothing to offer. Like, he's had moments where he's like, feels like he has nothing to offer the world, let alone like mentors, right? Like someone like me to him, right? And I'm telling him, like, bro, you know, like I was telling Taylor the other day in the office, almost crying about him. I said, you know how much you've encouraged my faith? Like, you know how much depth you give me with my relationship with God, because I know that God wouldn't leave your side. For me to ever doubt that he'll leave my side.
Yeah.
Right. And also too, and then also, you know, we go look at Skylar's story, right? Of like, you know, him being homeless and like what God has used him. And like, he's leading the church. Like he's bringing people to God. Like God is using that testimony over. It's not the guy that has been, and again, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just, again, it's a different testimony is of going like, man, I was born into a Christian household. We followed God our whole life. This was just, you know, again, like X, Y, and Z. Like, that is not the scenario for either one of them. Right. And like God grabbing a quote unquote nobody, right? Making them a somebody.
That's his MO.
Right? And then using them to glorify his kingdom. And like those are the people that he grabs. And those are the people that the humble at heart that are on their knees asking God, right? And a lot of times we get lukewarm, we get in the middle, we get semi-close to God. And, you know, like, I'm close enough. Yeah. God's so big that I really don't need to get closer because all my problems are already so small. Yeah, I can see him. He's there. He's taking care of my problems. He's doing all these other things, right? But again, along with that, right, we stop growing in relationship and closeness like with him. And I think that's like, I think I'm telling him, you was telling him that yesterday. It's like, bro, like, you have no idea how much God is using you right now and like the people that he's affecting. And like me being a major one of that is like, dude, like, that doesn't happen. Like, I'm around people every single day. Like, I know how long change takes. I know how long development takes. Yeah. I know how long growth takes. Like, I'm in, you know, like same thing with, you know, like we look at that. It's like, we've been leaders. I've grown people. I've mentored people. I've done these other things. And like, change is hard. Yeah. Like, and radical change is, you know, a lot of people can do it for a day, a week, or X, Y, and Z. It's like to radically, turn your life around and to do all those other things too as well. You know, again, like, that doesn't happen, right? And so, but in God's, it happens. Like, this is what God does. God's like, didn't you know? Don't you know who I be? Don't you know what I do? Like, and it's just a reminder for me. And it's like, he's been a massive, reminder for me, one, that God won't forsake me, right? And that he'll leave the 99 for the one. And also, two, he's not afraid to be seen with me, right? He's not afraid to be seen in my brokenness. He's not afraid. You know, a lot of people want to walk with you when everything's going well. Like, God's standing right by you in the midst of your fire, right? God will be in the fire with you, standing next to you, being seen with you, the sinner, the one that fell short, the one that is so far from God that everybody's saying, like, God's like, he ain't far from me. Like, I'm standing right next to him. Like, he may feel far from me, right? He might not feel my presence, right? But, like, I never left his side, and let that being encouraging to my relationship with God, to see how God is walking with him, through those things. And me just telling the God, like, last night is, I was just telling him, I was like, boy, you have no idea how often I think about you, because again, like, how much encouraging it is to my faith. And then, like, sure. I want to encourage you that if, like, you think that, you don't have a big impact or these things, it's like, that's just nothing further from the truth. That's the enemy's lies, because that's not the truth. Like, and you look how he did that look how short of a period of time he did that, right? Is that you're encouraging.
Yeah. God doesn't have a timetable.
Yeah. And I'm like, bro, the enemy trying to have you run right past that and just move on with your story. I'm just like, we ain't with Hussa. Hold on. I stopped the whole group. I said, hold on. We ain't gonna just run right past that. Like, we gonna have a conversation about that, about like what God just like used you to do. Yeah. Like, it's
good to bring that perspective to him too. Yeah,
just so huge. And so, and I think, along with that is, having that, and we'll continue to have like a lot of these conversations about what it looks like actively as faith kind of rolls out in your life, but having these the conversations about that. But I think on the same side of that, it's like, like, we want to talk about performance. We want to talk about what's going on in our lives and like how we show up and all those other things, is if you don't understand, like people are sitting here with the X's and O's, those mean nothing. Like I can't move the way that I move. I can't have the work ethic that I have. I can't speak the way that I speak. I can't show up the way that I show up. Like all of that is tied back to my relationship with God and my foundation. And it's like, when we run past that wisdom and we run past that, and we just go, oh, well, that person's just saying that because it's, like sounds good, right? Or like, when Dion's, going off and it's like, oh, well, that's because, he's trying to hide these other insecurities, or, or he's, he thinks it's like the public likes it, or all these other things, and being like, that's the difference. It's like when you're actually walking with God, you can see when someone's faith is authentic or not. And also, again, is he someone speaking about God or someone talking about like, no, like, God, like, there's a difference between like, God's over there. Like I know he's over there. I can see him.
Knowing and having a relation.
Yeah. It's just a way different thing, right? And I think the same thing too is like along with that is like practically how that plays out in your life of, leaning like into that and what that can create. I think is huge. Yeah. Good thing.
Faith.
Yeah, just faith, baby. Yeah, so we're gonna do more episodes like this. Yeah, and we'll call them just faith episodes. But just again, like looking at that, like what that practically, I think that was a good like foundational episode of just like setting out like what a relationship with God, can look like, feel like, what we could be missing out on if you don't have that relationship. It'd be huge.
Like.
Yeah. What did you say?
So what faith looks like.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let me pray us out, and then we'll get going. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time that we spent with you, God. And God, help us just reform our hearts, God. Help us get our eyes back focused on you, and just realizing that, again, what sacrifice is there for the one that gave us everything? And we just ask that you clear our hearts of any barriers that are keeping us back from you, and anywhere that we're leaning on our own understandings, God, and just open our eyes to your perspective, open our eyes to where you're moving, God. We want to see you move. Let us not run past the things that you're doing in our lives, and we want you to make those things blatant to us, God. When we see you move, it gives us hope. It gives us love for others. It changes our lives. It changes our perspective. And we just pray all these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen. Well, until next time, Farm System out.